Hello, Streakers. We are here today. I'm here with my co-host, Jeff. Welcome to our show, Jeff.
I'm so glad to be here. Thank you.
We're excited to be back. We are continuing our discussion on the 6 inhibitors that hold you back. And we're on inhibitor number 3 today. We're going to talk about motivation and a little bit about what is motivation. Do we go after it? Do we wait for it? Or is it, as Evie says, motivation equals mediocrity? So we're excited to talk about that today.
So let's start streaking. What is streaking and why should you do it?
Streaking is how you set up personal winning streaks. Look at who you want to be and what you need to do to become that person. This is streaking.
I'm Jeff.
And I'm Jami.
And we are streakers. Through 30 years of marriage and 7 children, we have learned the power of consecutive consistency or streaking.
To start streaking is simple. You just follow these 3 laws. Make it laughably simple, keep a record, and join the streaking community.
Streaking is your hidden superpower. With it, you will consistently progress and grow in whatever area of life you want.
In this podcast, Jeff and I will share all the fun, exciting, serious, solemn, wonderful parts of family, spiritual, professional, and personal life, and how streaking powers it all.
So join us in the conversation, join the movement, and start streaking today.
How are you doing this morning, Jeff?
You know, a lot better now.
I know. This is for all of you out there. You know, every now and then you need to do a round 2. Who's up for round 2?
That is true.
And that's what today is on our podcast. This is round 2.
Definitely round 2. Absolutely. You know, it reminds me actually, one of these cards that I had, I think it was yesterday.
What are these cards?
These are mindbrainemotion.com. That's where I get them for. And this card deck is 52 essential coping skills. And I thought I had one that was, I wish I had it right here.
So what made you buy these cards? 52.
You know what? I got these as a Christmas gift from from my supervisor at the time, or from my boss at the time, leader at the time. And it was, I forget which one it was, but they're really cool. And I've enjoyed having them. And every once in a while, I'll just review them. And they have just different ways of looking at life. So for example, it's a deck of cards. It really is. Like, this is the 6 of diamonds. Yeah. Focus on the problem. Identify a problem or situation that has been causing you stress.
Okay.
Brainstorm 5 ideas that could either solve the problem or remove you from the situation.
Interesting.
And then it says, turn your best idea into a solution by planning out actionable steps. Take the first step today and set a deadline for the rest of the steps.
That is great. So you have a streak around these?
Yeah, I review one a day. So I have a streak that is to review at least one development card every day. And it could be these, and I have other development cards that I review on a regular basis. But these ones are the 52 essential coping skills. I have a deck that is, the other one, this one is 52 essential relationship skills.
Oh.
So like this one, how do I show you that I care?
You're asking me. Sorry, I thought it was more than that.
No. And then what do you care about the most in life?
So these ones are different. These are like
these are different. Yeah, these are talk to people. These ones are relationship. The other one is more how I'm coping. And then I got one that I really like that is for, these are kindergartners, or what is it? 52 essential social skills for like elementary school kids. So like this one is celebrating others' success. Your class is split into 2 teams to play a trivia game. Your team loses. Your friend from the winning team comes over to talk to you after the game.
And of course, they're super excited because they won.
Exactly.
So they're excited to talk about it.
So what would you say to your friend? And can you feel good and bad emotions at the same time?
These are great.
So this one I really like, because even though it's elementary school, it applies to everything that we're doing, accepting decisions.
Oftentimes I feel like a review of the basics and reminding you of the basics is always an important thing.
Yeah.
And maybe part of that, since the first one was managing stress, I would say one of the ways to manage stress is take it back down to the basics. Yeah. Take it back down to elementary school.
Take it to the basics, baby. Take it to the basics.
Realize it doesn't have to be so complicated.
Yeah.
Those are great.
Yeah. So there's a lot. So there's a lot of good ones. So it's 52, and I review one of these, or 2 or 3. Sometimes it just
maybe you
depends
can put the
on
link in the
day.
show notes for if people are interested in them.
Yeah, I'll do that.
Those are great.
So anyway, on to Evie.
I know, talking about motivation. Well, first of all, we wanted to talk a little bit about what do we feel motivation is?
And I feel that motivation is that burning inner desire. I combined both those words, burning and inner, into earning a desire. But it's burning inner desire to do something. In other words, I feel inside of myself just this, I'm going to do it. I'm going to move forward. I'm going to get up out of bed and make it happen because I have a excitement level that it's a feeling, really. I have the feeling inside that I want to do it. I think that is what Evie means when she's saying motivation.
Right. I think so too.
And that go ahead.
I think that's why motivation is so attractive, because when you have that inner burning, as you describe it, which I think is a good way to describe it, you can move on that. Like you don't have to try as hard. That burning feeling, that internal feeling propels you to want to do the things that you need to do. So then she talks about what she says is stop waiting for the feeling. So I want to talk a little bit about the idea of motivation being a feeling. Because I think sometimes we don't maybe classify it as a feeling.
Right. I think that it's...
But yet we always say, oh, I don't feel motivated. Or, wow, I feel really motivated right now.
So I actually think we do. So don't we classify it? So you said we don't classify it as a feeling.
I think sometimes maybe people don't recognize that it's a feeling.
There we go. I think that's the way to say it. Definitely.
The way that we talk about it, it's like this essential thing that you need to have to accomplish things.
Right.
But in actuality, it's a feeling. It's an emotion.
And it is. It is a feeling that you have, and you look at, or because either you have it or you don't. I guess kind of a thing.
Exactly.
And that's really what, as she said it, and this is why it impacted you and I so much, is because she said motivation equals mediocrity, meaning that if I wait for the feeling to do it, that most likely I'm going to do it mediocre, or I'm not going to do it at all.
I think that's what she was saying, is that I would look at it and say, if we're waiting to feel the motivation, you're not going to do those things as often. And because I say motivation, like every other feeling or emotion, is fleeting. It's there or it's not. I don't think you always have control over when you feel it. And so if you're waiting for the feeling, it's an interesting thing, because we don't say things like, well, I'm waiting to be happy to do that. Or, well, I'll do that when I'm sad.
Okay, I just thought of a case in point. This is something that happened to both of us, not yesterday, but the day before.
Okay.
We were at the end of the day. You had a lot on your list. I had a lot on my list. And we're in that time of spring where the weeds are popping up and the flowers are not.
Yes.
It's kind of, I don't know what it is.
But if you wait long enough, you'll have nothing but weeds and no flowers.
Exactly. So, and we had Chance here, and we were both looking at each other, and we had planned earlier in the day that we were going to go out in the yard, pick the weeds, because we have events that are coming up this weekend, and we wanted the yard to look nice with no weeds in the rocks in order to present our yard in just in a nice way.
Right.
We both looked at each other and like, I am so tired. I do not want to go out and pick the weeds. I mean, that was the last thing that we wanted to do. So the motivation was zero. In other words, the feeling of motivation was completely absent. And we looked at each other, we said, but if we don't do it, we're never going to do it.
So in that scenario, what got you to go outside and do it? What did you use instead of motivation?
And this is really good, because I don't have a streak around that either. I mean, there's no streak. There's nothing that would be other than, I guess, what did I use for motivation? I guess I used you and Chance. I'm like, well, if we all do it together, then we can probably get out there and get it done.
And I would say I did the same thing. I used Chance because I thought, if you and I sit and watch...
He does not need to watch another show.
Exactly. That was what I thought. Is I'm like, it's a nice day outside. It's too early to call it a day. And if I sit down and watch a show because I'm tired, then that's what my teenager is doing too. And I'm like, I want him.
And I so wanted to, even with him, because Chance and I, we enjoy a show. I mean, we love watching and choosing a show to watch.
So there was a higher reason for us to go outside than being.
So would you call that
the reason?
So a higher reason. So it wasn't a feeling of being motivated. It was an actual decision, intentional, deliberate decision to do something that we know needed to be done, that we had planned earlier to be done. And we knew if we didn't go outside, that means all of us would have been inside watching a show.
Right.
Which we really would have enjoyed.
Yeah, we would have. In the moment. So that's another interesting thing, is that for that moment, I probably would have enjoyed the show because I was tired and I satisfied that feeling of being tired. But I know when I went to bed that night, I would have been frustrated with myself.
Yeah.
I would have felt like we didn't get the weeding done.
I would have been frustrated with you as well.
So that leads me, yes, you would have been frustrated with me. That leads me to something that we were talking about earlier, that we talk about motivation, and she's like, if you wait for motivation, you're just not going to do as much stuff. But, and earlier in our previous podcast, when we were talking about confidence.
You mean in the one that we deleted?
No, not that one.
Oh.
The one that we published about confidence.
Oh, okay,
that
one.
Don't wait for confidence. And that we talked about really what you need to get started is a little bit of courage to just say, I'm just going to exhibit some courage. And that confidence is actually an output, not an input.
Right.
So we had talked about, I think that motivation is a similar thing. Motivation, I wonder if it's more of an output that comes after you've done the action. Because one of the things that you said to get all of us outside is you're like, let's just go outside. We'll spend 30 minutes and then we're done. That's all we have to do.
I even set a timer on my watch.
You're
I'm like, we don't have to go any
it.
further than 30 minutes, and that's what we'll do. And we spent
an hour and a half out there.
Yeah.
So
and we felt good then we started talking about it, and Chance started talking about how deep the roots of every weed was, and then you started to apply life lessons to how weeding applies to life.
Which I'm sure all teenagers just love when their moms start doing that. But it was a fun.
It was a blast.
A fun day.
We had a great time.
And the weather was perfect. I remember thinking, I'm really glad that I didn't waste perfect weather sitting inside and watching a show just because I was a little too tired to overcome.
And it's interesting, as we got going, the tiredness somewhat
dissipated,
went away.
Yes.
I mean, dissipated.
And
Good way to say it, because it didn't go all the way away.
No.
I mean, it wasn't like I came in and I was like, all right, I'm energized. Let's do something else.
However, we did end up staying out there longer than 30 minutes.
Yes, we did.
We got quite a bit done. So the motivation was actually an output of getting started.
You're right. And that's where I think that's one of the reasons why I like streaking and why I like to streak, is because often it is the catalyst to start. It's why I use laughably simple. It's why I have streaks in so many areas of my life, because there are valuable things that I want to be doing, and physically I can feel tired at the end of a day and not do some of those things that I want to do and that I've planned to do and that add value to my life. And therefore, a streak that's laughably simple creates that spark of motivation. Or would you say it's a spark? It creates a spark. And as soon as I get that spark, then I get motivated. Now, I will say this. There are some times I just do the laughably simple of the streak, and I don't get motivated to do anymore.
It doesn't always happen.
However, I never regret it. I never regret any streak that I've completed. I always have fulfillment from doing the streak.
I think that's actually a good litmus test for a streak, is as you do it. Because you had said at one point, you're like, I've never gone out on a walk or a run when I wasn't motivated. And then I go and do it anyway. And when I come back, I've never been like, well, that was a complete waste of time. Why did I do it? You've never felt that way.
I've never felt that way.
That getting yourself past that initial difficulty of starting, when you come back, even if it was just a mile or if it was 3 miles or however far you went, you always come back and feel like, okay, I'm glad I did that. Whatever it looked like, I'm still glad I did it. So that's a good litmus test for a streak. If you do have a streak that you get done and you're starting to feel like this is the biggest waste of time, I don't know why I'm doing it, you need to look at why you're doing it.
Yeah.
Like maybe you shouldn't be doing it. Maybe it's not something that is valuable of your time and not worth it.
You want to do. Right. I mean, and like you said, it's not valuable. You said something else too in our deleted podcast that I wanted to revisit.
We're referencing all of our deleted podcasts.
No, there was something about how you said external and internal motivation, where One was how others are judging me, and the other is how I judge myself. Do you remember that? Was that in relation to the win-lose?
Yes,
or
because
to the motivation?
Because often when we talk about, this is something we encounter a lot when we talk about streaking, and that is the concept of making something simple often seems to be followed up with people saying, well, does that really count?
Oh, yes.
And that was
this is what you were saying.
And so in reference to, continuing the example of the run-walk streak, you're not motivated. You don't feel the motivation to get outside. And for me, that's particularly true when it's cold and dark outside. And I am not motivated to go out there. So you do what you need to, you go, come back, and even if the experience wasn't enjoyable, so it stayed cold and maybe even colder than I thought it was, which oftentimes can make me annoyed while I'm on the walk. Now it is dark and it is cold and I'm sick of it. When I come home, I still feel good about that experience. If we only went a mile, we still feel good about that experience. And then you had said, even if other people say, well, does it even really count for much? That's not very much. Or maybe a different example that seems smaller is writing a sentence in your journal. If you write just one sentence in your journal, oftentimes we encounter people saying, it's just not that much. It's not going to make a difference. The one aspect is, do I look at myself and think, okay, I'm glad I wrote in my journal. At least it's a sentence. That sentence has value. I still feel good that I did it. I don't feel it was a waste of time. But someone else from the outside can look at it and say, does that even count? Those are two different things. One is the inside, you saying, look, I made a commitment. I kept the commitment. That's what matters. Over time, it adds up to a character, the way that I live my life, the decisions that I make, and it makes it easier, and I'm more practiced at making those decisions in the moment. From the outside, someone may look at that one thing and say, wow, that's just not that big of a deal. That's just not that impressive. I think that often happens. The things that we're doing on the inside, the small things that we're doing that help to build our character, that help to write who we are in the bigger moments, when you take that little thing and someone looks at it from the outside, they may look at it and dismiss it because it just doesn't seem that big enough. It just doesn't seem impressive enough.
Right.
But I think there's value in looking at it and saying that external opinion shouldn't have as much value as my internal opinion. But that's a hard thing to do sometimes.
Ooh, that's interesting. So that external, and I would say external opinion doesn't have as much weight, should not have as much weight as your
internal opinion.
And that should have the weight. However, oftentimes we'll put the weight outside.
Yes.
We'll put the weight on how many people have liked my comment, how many people have gone to this particular post, how, it's
whatever
the external, whatever it is. Whereas what you're saying, and this is why I love this so much, is you've got the external and the internal value system is, you should absolutely have it outweigh anything that's the external value system, that you are comfortable with yourself and what it is you've decided to do. Mm-hmm. And something else that I wanted to point out, that I was trying to find it, I read in another newsletter that I got about how consistency compounds. And what you were saying is
compound interest.
Yes, like compound interest. As you get consistent with this, and that's really where the work begins. So when she says, Evie, motivation equals mediocrity, one of the things that she says in there is you'll do the bare minimum. Now, I obviously have a little bit of a different opinion about that, because I'm okay with doing the bare minimum as long as I'm doing it consistently, and that will compound through time. And that bare minimum is not the bar for which I'm reaching. It is the floor on which I am standing to reach for a bar. Mm-hmm. And I set up that floor such that I can reach for that bar. And therefore, the motivation to do the laughably simple thing every single day it's really the decision that this is who I want to be.
Right.
So there's one other thing as far as something you asked that I wanted to go into as well. And that was, so what is it that got us out the door? And you said it was a higher purpose. Mm-hmm. There was something higher in the purpose that we wanted to accomplish. That's one of the reasons why when I look at and talk to a lot of people who say, well, I don't want to keep my streak alive all the time. I want to have a streak freeze, or I want to have something that allows me to pause the streak, to take a vacation from it, if you will. And what I look at for me personally in my life, and granted, you may see it differently, is that I don't want to freeze a streak because it's something that I want to continue to do. It's something that adds value to my life. And I don't want to lose the momentum, the compound interest, the momentum that I've already gained off of it. So there are times where I will do more than what is the floor of the streak. And there are other times where I do just the floor of the streak. But the motivation for the higher purpose is what keeps me going.
Mm-hmm. This is so good, because I was looking at how motivation is defined.
Yeah.
And that was it. It's the reason that you have for acting or behaving in a certain way.
And what was that out of? Was that dictionary.com?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the dictionary. And as you were talking, I thought I'm glad you mentioned momentum. And I was thinking about when we used to talk about the flywheel, and that it takes a lot of energy to get things going. And you brought up something that I've been thinking a lot about sometimes with some of my streaks is you have days where you do want to maybe not do them.
Yeah.
That you're like, I just don't want to think about it. I want to have a day where I'm not holding myself to those standards anymore.
To that
level
of consistency.
And I liked, yes, to that level of consistency. And I liked that you said, I think each person has to find out what works for them. And because people have different experiences and but there is a principle of momentum that is true. That as you get going, momentum can carry you through some of those difficult times. And I feel like that's what you're saying, is that as I get going, that momentum builds. And then when I look at it and I'm like, I don't want to do this. You kind of look at all that you've done and you think, but do I want to let that momentum slow to the point that it possibly stops?
Yeah.
Because we all know how hard it is to get something going from zero versus to get something going from, like, what is it? It's easier to steer a ship when it's moving than it is. And it's easier to steer a car when it's moving. Anything at a standstill is going to be harder to get going than something that's already, and even if what's going is just a little bit.
You can turn the wheel, you can, switch the rudder, but you're not going to go in any kind of, you're staying where you are.
And so that initial push, that inertia that needs to take place to get something started from zero is significant. And so that's part of why the laughably simple is in place. Is recognizing that not every day is going to be a day that you have a ton of movement.
Yeah.
And keeping that, but momentum is a real thing.
So this leads me to the last little point that I want to make, and you don't have to comment on this if you don't want to. It's just something that I'm thinking about, and that is what defines success. In other words, if someone is successful, what is it that defines that particular success? Is it that they kept moving? Is it that they kept in the direction that they needed to go? Is it that they had consistency? And one of the things is success always cut out of the same mold? Success seems, I believe, in most cases to look like it's cut out of the same mold, when in actuality, success can be defined by you in whatever it is you choose to do. It's your intentional, deliberate success. I was listening to a podcast just the other day, and the individual who was speaking was talking about having fulfillment in your life and looking at your life in a way that considers the cost benefit and what the cost benefit is of either saving money or spending money, and what that looks like and where your value is. The thing overall that I would say that I took out of that podcast, as well as what I've looked at in regards to streaky and what we're talking about here today, is that success, there's not one mold for success. You get to define your own success. And the key is believing in yourself and recognizing that whatever you choose is valuable.
This makes me think of a conversation we had with our daughter a couple days ago. She's serving a mission for our church, and she was asking about goals and streaks and how they fit together. And as you were talking, I thought, that's in a way for me to also measure success, but they're measured differently. The success of a streak is measured differently than the success of a goal or a challenge streak, or that a goal, which is similar to a challenge streak, I feel like you have a start line, a finish line, and a deadline. Right. So you have an official time that you start and an official thing that that finish line. Like there's a definite way to tell if you succeeded or not at that goal. A streak, the success is different because the success of a streak isn't crossing the finish line per se. For like what I would call
a lifetime streak or a time of life streak, yeah.
It's the fact that I did it again today. I put in the effort again today. So it is interesting. I love that you said, I think there's a lot of value in doing exactly what you said, of sitting back and deciding, how do I measure success? What is success? Because I think if we don't sit down and decide for ourselves what it is, other people will decide it for us.
Yeah.
And that can often be a losing game if you let other people decide what success looks like in your life.
One of the sayings that we've had quite often in my life that I've thought about is indecision becomes decision through the passing of time.
Mm-hmm. In other words, something will happen just because
something's going to happen. It's just, am I going to be the one that's making the decisions on the areas of influence that I have?
Right.
Or am I going to be allowing all those decisions to be made for me? And I think that that's the whole premise behind motivation and streaking. That is, what do I decide to do deliberately and intentionally on a daily, weekly, monthly basis? Mm-hmm. And that consistency will add value to your life over time.
Yep. And I would also say something I've worked really hard with raising children is, because I have a lot of children, 7, I've been able to recognize that each child is very different and that there is a huge amount of value for each child to understand themselves. And when I talk about this, I often use the example of money, because I have some children that when they have money, they save it. And then I have some children that when they have money, they spend it. And then I have some children that only spend money when there's other people around for them to spend that money on, but they don't spend it on themselves. And then vice versa. But it's fascinating to watch that each child has a different response to that money. And it's not that one way is the right way to spend money, but that it's really important that each child understand their relationship with it, like how they're going to respond. And then in understanding that, you learn where your strengths are and where your opportunities, is that what you guys call them? Not weaknesses, but opportunities, where your opportunity for growth is. And I feel like streaking is a really great tool to work in that process, to be able to look at it and say, okay, what things help me to be motivated? Or when I'm not motivated, what things help me to maintain momentum? And my streaks are an awesome way to evaluate how you feel and the things that work for you. And I think it's important to do that.
Absolutely. So if you build your life around motivation, you'll live inconsistently. Mm-hmm. If you build it around streaks, you'll live intentionally. So what's something you've been waiting to do until you feel motivated? That's a question we have for you. I suggest, and we suggest, you start a streak today. What is it? Make it small, laughably simple, so that you can do it even without the motivation. And that's honestly how you escape the mediocrity and move toward mastery. Thanks so much for joining Jami and I on the Streaking Podcast today. Thanks, hon.
This was fun. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I feel some momentum.
Round 2 was much better.
Yes. Y'all can relate to that, right?
Absolutely. Hey, a little Southern coming out there. Wow, you had your little Georgia coming out. Hey, if you'd like to share with us your thoughts and ideas around motivation and how you are able to get up off the couch or do whatever it is you want to do in lack of motivation, we'd love to hear from you. Give me an email at Jeffrey, Jeffery, at mystreaksapp.com or
Jami, Jami, at mystreaksapp.com.
Until we talk again, we hope that you have a marvelous, fantastic, wonderful day, and as always,
keep streaking.
It's the little things